In private, she is an absolutely screaming woman, unable to control her emotions when she's criticized. Will she dump Harry? Well, there's no evidence that she will.
Something strange is unfolding behind palace walls. A story that was meant to stay buried is suddenly rising to the surface. A powerful book, a broken image, and whispers growing louder by the day. But what's really happening, and why now? The deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Before we even touch the headlines, we need to understand the man at the center of this storm, because without him, none of this hits the way it does. Tom Bower is not some internet voice chasing clicks. He's not guessing. He's not speculating. This is a man who has built a career on walking straight into powerful circles, and walking out with stories those same people desperately wanted buried. We're talking about a writer who has taken on figures like Tony Blair, King Charles III, Robert Maxwell, and Richard Branson. Not exactly lightweights. Not exactly people who enjoy being exposed. And yet, every time, his work held up under pressure. That's his pattern. That's his reputation. And here's where things get interesting. When Meghan Markle entered the royal stage, Bower didn't rush in blindly. He watched. He studied. He waited. Because to him, this wasn't just another celebrity story. It was a collision between monarchy, media, and modern ambition. A perfect storm. His first book already shook the ground. It opened doors people didn't even realize were locked. But this new one? This one was different. This one came loaded. Because according to Bower, this wasn't just about what the public had seen. It was about everything they hadn't. Now here's the twist that no one saw coming. Before the book even officially launched, before readers could flip a single page, something strange happened. The criticism started early. Labels were thrown around. Words like conspiracy began floating in the air. And instead of hurting the book, it pushed it straight to #1. Think about that for a second. The very attempt to discredit the story became the fuel that launched it. The louder the dismissal, the stronger the curiosity. People didn't turn away, they leaned in. And Bower? He didn't panic. He didn't backtrack. If anything, he seemed almost amused. Because from his perspective, the reaction told him everything he needed to know. He has said before that the only stories worth telling are the ones people try to stop. The ones hidden behind silence. The ones protected by image and influence. And suddenly, here was another story, reacting exactly the same way. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. But let's be real for a moment. Why does this matter so much? Because in today's world, image is everything. Especially for public figures. Carefully crafted, tightly controlled, polished to perfection. Every appearance, every word, every photograph, it's all part of a narrative. And according to Bower, that narrative doesn't always match reality. That's the core tension here. On one side, you have a public image built on authenticity, relatability, and control. On the other, you have an investigator whose entire career is built on pulling that image apart, piece by piece. And when those two forces collide, something has to give. What makes this even more unsettling is how deliberate Bower's process is. He doesn't just rely on headlines or rumors. He digs. He reaches out. He contacts people most writers never even find. Dozens of them. Sometimes more. And yes, many stay silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because speaking comes with consequences. That silence, in Bower's world, is not empty. It's loud. It tells its own story. And occasionally, someone does speak. A voice from the past. A connection the public never noticed. A detail that doesn't quite fit the polished version we've all been shown. That's how these books are built. Not on one explosive claim, but on a pattern of small, consistent revelations that slowly shift the entire picture. And once that picture starts changing, it's very hard to unsee it. Now step back and look at the timing. A book rising to #1 before release. Public pushback arriving before the facts are even read. a growing sense that something bigger is sitting just beneath the surface. That's not normal. That's pressure building. Because when a narrative is strong, it doesn't fear scrutiny. But when it reacts this quickly, this defensively, you have to ask yourself one simple question. What exactly is it trying to protect? And that's where this story really begins. Because if Section 1 is about the man who couldn't be silenced, what comes next is about the image that might not survive him. Section 2, the image that didn't add up. Now let's move from the man to the illusion. Because what Tom Bauer does next is where things start to feel uncomfortable. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet contradictions that don't sit right. And it begins with something so simple, it almost feels harmless. Yes, jam. When Meghan Markle introduced her lifestyle brand, the imagery was flawless. Soft sunlight, a calm garden, strawberries picked by hand, a mother in control of her world. Domestic, elegant, real. It wasn't just a product. It was a feeling, a story. And people weren't just meant to buy the jam. They were meant to buy into her. That's how modern branding works. You don't sell the item. You sell identity, belonging, aspiration. But here's where Bauer leans in. Because according to his investigation, that entire image may not be what it seemed. The strawberries, not necessarily from that garden. The preparation, not that kitchen. The final product, manufactured far away, processed through facilities in the United States, far removed from the peaceful, handcrafted picture being presented. Now pause. Because this isn't really about jam, is it? It's about authenticity. If the story behind something doesn't match the reality, what exactly are people buying? And more importantly, does it matter? For some, no. It's just marketing. Everyone does it. But for others, especially those who believed in the image being presented, it hits differently. Because the connection they felt wasn't with a product, it was with a person. And that connection relies on trust. Once that starts to crack, even slightly, everything else begins to feel uncertain. And this is where Bauer's argument sharpens. He suggests that the success of any personal brand, especially one built around lifestyle and relatability, depends entirely on genuine public affection. Not attention. Not controversy. Affection. People don't consistently support someone just because they're famous. They support them because they feel something real. And according to Bauer, that emotional foundation was never as strong as it needed to be. Now layer that over what happens next. Because while this carefully crafted image was being presented to the public, another story was unfolding behind the scenes. Netflix. A deal that once carried enormous expectations. A partnership that was supposed to redefine storytelling, offering insight, influence, and global reach. On paper, it was perfect. But reality, far more complicated. The content came. The attention followed. But the lasting cultural impact, the kind that turns projects into legacy moments, never fully arrived. And timing, as always, plays its role. Because just as Bauer's latest work begins gaining traction, news surfaces that the relationship is coming to an end. Now here's the thing. Big partnerships don't collapse overnight. These decisions build slowly, quietly, long before the public ever hears about them. Which means, if Bauer had already pointed in that direction, and then it happens, people start paying closer attention. Not because they want drama, but because patterns are forming. And humans are wired to notice patterns. A product story that doesn't fully align. A business deal that fades instead of grows. An image that feels increasingly constructed. Individually, each of these things can be explained. But together, they start to raise a different kind of question. Not, is this true? But, why does this keep happening? And this is where things get even more delicate. Because maintaining a public image at that level isn't easy. It requires constant effort, constant control, constant shaping of perception. But the more tightly something is controlled, the more fragile it becomes. One inconsistency might be ignored. Two can be defended. But when they start stacking up, even quietly, the narrative begins to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. And that's what makes this section so important. Because it's not about proving anything beyond doubt. It's about noticing the difference between what is shown and what is discovered, between performance and reality. And once that gap becomes visible, even for a moment, it's very hard to look away. Because deep down, people don't just want a good story. They want a true one. And if first part showed us the man willing to ask uncomfortable questions, part second shows us what happens when those questions start finding answers. Now we step into the part no one likes to talk about, but everyone feels: money. Because behind every image, every brand, every carefully staged moment, there's a number keeping it all alive. And according to Tom Bauer, that number is starting to matter more than ever. Let's strip away the glamour for a second. From the outside, the life of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle looks untouchable. A California estate. Global recognition. Deals worth millions. The kind of life most people only ever imagine. But here's the truth people often forget. High income doesn't mean endless money. Because high lifestyle demands even higher maintenance. Bauer estimates something that stops you in your tracks, not because it sounds dramatic, but because it sounds realistic. Millions. Just to maintain the life. Security alone, a massive annual cost. The home. Staff, upkeep, operations, travel, public appearances, image management. It all stacks. Quietly. Relentlessly. And here's the catch most people miss. That kind of lifestyle doesn't just require money. It requires consistent money. Not one big deal. Not one successful project. But a steady flow year after year. And that's where the pressure begins to build. Because when you look at the timeline, something starts to feel off. The book deal, huge. The media deals, massive headlines. The attention, global. But over time, the momentum slows. Projects don't land the same way. The excitement fades quicker. The next big thing doesn't quite hit like the last. And suddenly, the gap between earning and spending starts to matter. Now here's where Bauer doesn't soften his words. He suggests that the financial model depends heavily on one thing: public interest. Because without it, the deals don't come. Without it, the brand weakens. Without it, the entire structure starts to wobble. And here's the uncomfortable question sitting right underneath all of this. What happens when people stop watching? Not all at once. Not dramatically. But gradually. Because attention is currency now. And it's one of the most unstable currencies there is. One moment, you're at the center of the conversation. The next, the world moves on. Now layer that with something even more intense. Expectation. Because once you've reached a certain level, the world doesn't expect you to maintain it. It expects you to grow it. Bigger deals. Bigger influence. Bigger impact. But growth isn't guaranteed. And when it slows, the pressure doesn't. It increases. Quietly at first. Then all at once. And this is where things begin to feel personal. Because financial pressure doesn't just affect numbers. It affects decisions, relationships, behavior, even identity. Think about it. If your entire public image is built on success, influence, and control, what happens when those things start slipping, even slightly? Do you adjust? Do you double down? Or do you try to hold the image together, even tighter? Bauer leans toward a difficult conclusion. That the current situation isn't just about money running low. It's about options running out. Because when income becomes uncertain and expenses stay high, choices shrink. And when choices shrink, people feel it. Especially inside a relationship. Now here's where the tone shifts. Because this isn't just a financial story anymore. It becomes a human one. Two people, under constant public scrutiny. A lifestyle that demands more than it gives. A reputation that has to be maintained, no matter what. And underneath it all, pressure. The kind that doesn't show up in interviews. The kind that doesn't appear in photographs. But the kind that shapes everything behind the scenes. And here's the part most people overlook. Money problems don't need to be catastrophic to be dangerous. They just need to be persistent. Because slow pressure is the kind that breaks things quietly. No headlines. No announcements. Just small cracks, getting wider over time. And if Bauer is right, those cracks are already there. Not fully visible. Not fully understood. But present. Waiting. Because in the end, it's not the headlines, the deals, or even the public opinion that tests something like this. It's sustainability. Can the life they've built actually hold? And if Section 2 exposed the cracks in the image, Section 3 forces us to confront something even heavier. What happens when reality starts catching up to the illusion? Section 4, the marriage, the power, and the point of no return. Now we step into the part people whisper about, but rarely say out loud. The marriage. Because when everything else starts shaking, money, image, influence, this is where the truth usually reveals itself. And according to Tom Bauer, this is not the simple, collapsing story many expected. It's more complicated than that. On the surface, Prince Harry is not a man looking to leave. In fact, Bauer suggests something almost unexpected. Harry genuinely loves Meghan Markle. Not strategically. Not publicly. Genuinely. And that matters. Because it changes the entire dynamic. This isn't a cold arrangement falling apart. It's a deeply emotional bond, tied together by dependency, history, and something harder to define. You have to understand Harry's position to see why. For years, he struggled to find stability. Relationships that didn't quite last. A life lived under constant pressure, constantly compared, constantly watched. Then Meghan enters. She listens. She understands his frustrations. She reflects his feelings back to him in a way no one else had before. And for someone like Harry, that kind of connection isn't just comforting. It's powerful. But here's where Bauer's version takes a darker turn. He doesn't just describe a connection. He describes influence. Because according to him, Meghan didn't just support Harry. She shaped the way he saw everything around him. His past, his family, even his role within the royal system. And once someone starts viewing their entire world through a new lens, there's no easy way back. Now pause there. Because this is where things get uncomfortable. Not because it proves anything beyond doubt, but because it introduces a possibility. That this relationship isn't built equally. That one side may be leading more than the other. And when pressure builds from the outside, financial strain, public criticism, fading opportunities, that imbalance doesn't disappear. It intensifies. Now add another layer. Isolation. Because unlike most people, Harry doesn't just walk away from stress and reconnect with familiar ground. That option is complicated. According to Bauer, returning to the royal fold in any meaningful public way is not something Prince William would allow. And that's not emotion, it's strategy. From William's perspective, every time Harry has been partially welcomed back, that access has later been used as leverage. 4 interviews. 4 deals. 4 influence. So the door, it's not just closed. It's locked. And that leaves Harry in a position very few people can truly understand. Too far from where he came from. And not fully secure in where he is now. That kind of position creates tension. Because when a person feels they have nowhere else to go, they don't just stay. They hold on tighter. And that brings us back to Meghan. Because Bauer's portrayal of her is not one-dimensional. It's not just criticism, it's contrast. He acknowledges intelligence, resilience, the ability to withstand intense pressure. But alongside that, he paints a picture that's far less flattering. A person who is intensely self-focused. A person who struggles to see beyond her own perspective. A person who, in private moments, may react very differently than the composed image presented publicly. And here's where things start to feel fragile. Because when strong personalities meet pressure, the result isn't always unity. Sometimes it's conflict. Bauer references moments, unconfirmed, observed, whispered about, where tensions between them became visible. Not staged. Not controlled. Real. And while no one can fully verify what happens behind closed doors, one truth remains constant across every relationship, royal or not. Pressure reveals character. Now consider everything stacked together. A lifestyle that demands constant income. A public image that requires constant control. A shrinking set of opportunities. A closed door back to the past. And a relationship carrying all of that weight. That's not a calm environment. That's a pressure chamber. And pressure chambers don't break things instantly. They crack them slowly, quietly, until one day something gives. Now here's the part that makes this even more complex. Despite all of this, despite the tension, the criticism, the uncertainty, Bauer does not confidently say the marriage will end. In fact, he leans the other way. Why? 2 reasons. Children and circumstance. Children create anchors. They tie people together in ways that go beyond emotion or strategy. And circumstance. That's even stronger. Because when both individuals are deeply invested in maintaining what they've built, financially, publicly, personally, walking away isn't just difficult. It's risky. And risk is something neither side can afford right now. So what you're left with is not a clean break. Not a fairy tale. But something far more real. A relationship under pressure, adapting, holding, shifting in ways the public may never fully see. And here's the quiet truth sitting underneath all of it. Love doesn't remove pressure. It just changes how long people are willing to endure it. And in this case, that endurance may be the only thing holding everything together. Section 5. The Crown, the Consequences, and the Silence that Speaks. Now we arrive at the part where everything stops feeling like speculation and starts feeling like consequence. Because this isn't just about image anymore. This is about power. And power, especially inside the monarchy, doesn't shout. It moves quietly, and when it moves, it's final. At the center of this stands Prince William. Not the brother from old photographs. Not the young prince walking beside Prince Harry in a shared moment of grief. But the future king. And according to Tom Bauer, William's position is not emotional. It's calculated. Because from where he stands, this is no longer a family disagreement. It's a matter of protecting the institution. Every time Harry has been given even a small window back in, something followed. A headline. A revelation. A deal built on proximity to the royal name. And patterns like that don't get ignored at that level. They get shut down. Completely. That's why the idea of Harry returning in any official capacity isn't just unlikely. It's off the table. Not temporarily. Permanently. And if that sounds harsh, it's because monarchy has never been built on softness. It survives on control, continuity, and above all, distance from risk. Now here's where things take a sharper turn. Because for a long time, many believed that even if tensions grew, certain lines could never be crossed. Titles, for example. Royal status. Things that felt untouchable. Until Prince Andrew changed that. What happened to him rewrote the rules overnight. Titles removed. Roles stripped. No drawn-out process. No impossible barriers. Just a decision executed. And suddenly, something that once seemed unthinkable became very real. According to Bauer, Harry is aware of this. Deeply aware. Because if the same logic is applied in the future, under William's reign, there is nothing stopping history from repeating itself. Not just for him, but potentially for his children as well. Now pause on that. Because this isn't just about status. It's about identity. Being a royal isn't just a title. It's a position tied to history, legacy, and global recognition. Take that away, and everything changes. And when you combine that possibility with everything else already in motion, financial pressure, fading influence, a fragile public image, the stakes become something else entirely. They become existential. Now bring in King Charles III. A father, a king, and a man caught somewhere in between. Because unlike William, Charles doesn't operate purely from strategy. There's emotion there. History. Guilt, even. A son who went through trauma the world witnessed. A relationship that fractured slowly, then all at once. And yet, despite all of that, he hasn't found a solution. Because this is the reality of power. Sometimes, even when you want to fix something, you can't. Not without breaking something else. And standing just slightly to the side of all this is Queen Camilla. Watching, observing, and forming her own conclusions. According to Bauer, her view is blunt. She saw a change in Harry long before everything publicly unraveled. From someone widely liked, easygoing, grounded, to someone driven by grievance, constant frustration, constant dissatisfaction. And in her eyes, that shift didn't happen on its own. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it adds another layer to the story. Because it shows how those closest to the situation interpret what's happened, not just publicly, but privately. And when those interpretations align with actions, distance, silence, firm boundaries, it tells you something important. This isn't temporary. This is settled. Now step back and look at the full picture. A book sitting at number 1 before release. A brand facing questions about authenticity. A major deal quietly ending. A lifestyle that demands more than it brings in. A marriage under pressure. And a royal door that isn't just closed, but sealed. That's not a phase. That's a turning point. Because eventually, every situation like this reaches a moment where it can't stay in limbo anymore. Something has to shift. Direction. Strategy. Identity. Something. And here's the part that lingers. Silence. No direct response. No clear pushback. No detailed denial addressing every point. Just distance. And silence, especially in situations like this, has a strange way of speaking louder than words. Because when everything is controlled, managed, carefully presented, silence feels out of place. Unless there's nothing left to control, or no clear way to respond without making things worse. Now, does that confirm anything? No. But it does something just as powerful. Keeps the questions alive. And right now, those questions are growing. Not fading. Not disappearing. Growing. Because once a narrative starts to shift, it rarely goes back to what it was before. People look closer. Listen harder. Notice more. And the space between what's shown and what's believed gets wider. What we're watching right now isn't just another headline cycle. It's something slower, heavier, more permanent. Reputation being tested. Relationships being strained. Power quietly drawing its lines. And whether you believe every claim or question every detail, that tension you feel, that's real. Because something is changing. The only question is, how far it goes. If you've made it this far, you already know, this story isn't done yet. So don't just scroll past it. Stay with it. Because the next chapter? It won't be announced loudly. It'll reveal itself piece by piece. And when it does, you'll want to see it coming.